Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast with your hosts, Jason Mefford and Kathy Groover. Fire and Earth, giving you the keys to unlock your limitless potential.
Welcome to another edition of the Fire and Earth podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason Mefford.
And I'm Kathy Groover, and we are so excited today to have a good friend and flying trapeze buddy of mine, Dennis Ford. Woo! Dennis! All right, Dennis, welcome aboard our little crazy train. Tell us a little bit about you, what you do, and then we'll get into some awesome corporate culture stuff.
Well, I'm glad we finally got around to talking about me.
I want to talk about me,
Thank you for having me on the show. It's very cool to be here and very cool to see you face to face. And yes, to everyone out there, we fly trapeze together. That's how we met. In the real world, I own a corporate communications company called Quantum Leap Productions. And in the world of corporate communications, we're this weird entity, so it's as close to corporate as we get. But in a nutshell, we're a message company. So we take whatever a company is doing in a live meeting or what they need in a video, and we don't change the message radically, but we wildly change the delivery. So instead of the director of marketing at a big meeting of 500 people, management has the holy grail of stuff. This is the information that leaders sit around and ponder and fret over that, if these 500 people don't get this, we're really screwed. But when it comes time to deliver the message, a PowerPoint slide goes up, lights go down, and some droning VP of sales or marketing starts talking, and 500 people zone out. So with that cognizance, what we'll do is we'll come in and completely restructure the delivery of that message. So first we shred the message and understand it, but the delivery might be an all original musical comedy. Cast of 8, live band, 6 production numbers, fully choreographed, 60-page script. And it's all based on the premise we remember plays, films, and stories. We do not remember presentations. So we've been doing that for a long time, and then we're also a video company, and we do really cool corporate video messaging and stuff like that. So the reason I give you the backstory is to get to where we are today, which is the book and stuff like that. So that's my little backstory. Gets us to today. What's next?
What's next? Well, the question is, how did you make the shift from doing that to writing this book and really helping educate people about culture? So to go from communicating the message to building a new foundation of company, how did you make that jump?
I'm glad you asked. And we didn't work this out ahead of time. I mean, this is how good Kathy is. She jumped in with the setup with a perfect question. I love being here. I love you guys. Okay. So 28 years, I'm sitting in very high-level leadership meetings with Fortune 100 and 500 companies. I'm not saying it like it's a big deal. That's what we do. And we still do that. I still have Quantum Leap. And I realized this over years and years and years, but it actually came as an epiphany that here I am sitting with the proverbial smartest people in the room. These are Wharton MBAs and Stanford MBAs and presidents of huge divisions of major, major companies. And I realized that when it came to understanding their employees, they were dead from the neck up. Not all of them, but just about all of them. Can I tell a story? Quick story.
Okay.
Once Jason goes, no, we're not.
No, sorry. No stories on this one.
No stories. We just want facts and statistics.
No, we don't. We want stories.
Make it as boring as bloody possible, if you could, please.
Okay, so I'm sitting in this leadership meeting, a very large banking entity, Fortune 100 company, actually top 20, Fortune top 20 company. So we're going to do a series of meetings around the country for them, and they're talking about, their imperatives and what's important and all that corporate stuff. And then I noticed they sort of digressed to complaining and dissing their employees. So they got off on a jag where they were going, our employees are, the salespeople are prima donnas and the back shop doesn't get it and they're not fast enough and they don't realize this and that. And at the same moment, they say, we've got a great theme for our series of meetings this year. It's culture shift. And I thought, okay, that's pretty powerful. I like that. But then he said what his culture shift was. It was a new sales plan, new marketing plan, new backshop protocol, and a customer service imperative. nothing to do with culture.
Uh-uh.
And so my epiphany was that these people had no idea that they were the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that they were complaining about, everything that they were dissing, everything that they were negatively saying about their employees was them.
Uh.
And that was the genesis of what ended up being a book about the maladies and, frankly, the abysmal condition of corporate culture in America, as evidenced by the fact that 80% of the workforce in America is unhappy and unengaged.
Mm-hmm.
So something ain't working
Yeah.
when you've got 80% of your workforce unhappy and unengaged.
Yeah.
And so the next step for me, and actually it was a mutual friend of ours that I told this to, and it was Allison Maslin.
Oh, yeah.
She's a high-end, she's also a trapeze flyer, who we know. So she runs a high-end business coaching company in San Diego. So I went through this with her, and she said, you know what you have to do? You have to write a book. And I went, oh, come on, I've never written a book. I'm not going to write a book. She goes, you got to write a book. So this was just a year and a half ago, and she stayed on me until I wrote it all down. And what she said, and I would agree, especially now that I've been talking about it more in consulting, is that I would love it if we lived in a perfect world where every corporate CEO and executive wanted their employees to be happy and cared, and that a joyful, supportive, respectful workplace was an imperative. But you're nodding your heads and smirking at the same time because you know that just isn't so in this universe or any other. So I thought, okay, let's tie it to let's monetize it. Ergo, title of book. We're going to monetize culture to make it more attractive to corporate leadership to maybe actually do something about. So when I really started researching it, I was absolutely stunned at what negative culture costs American business. $500 billion every single year. And it went up last year, because I get my statistics from Harvard Business Review. It went up 50 billion last year alone, in the year since I wrote the book. So it's $550 billion it cost American companies because their employees are unhappy and unengaged. And so I've linked it to the monetization, even employee by employee, that, and this is, how about this for some really groundbreaking stuff? Happy, engaged people work harder and better than those who are unhappy and unengaged.
What?
Yep.
What? Who could have possibly known that?
Crazy talk.
The absolute irony is, as we're laughing about this, is that if you asked a 13-year-old eighth grader, hey, do you think happy, engaged people do a better job? Like when you're happy, do you do better? And they go, well, duh, yeah. Flip back to those smartest people in the room. Clearly, they don't get that. And so there's this massive disconnect in American business culture that is costing massive amounts of money.
Yep.
And it can be fixed.
Well, it can be. And what's interesting is because, like you're talking about, I mean, I came up through the business world, through corporations, have the MBAs and all that kind of stuff, right? And you're not taught in business school some of these things, right? Usually you're taught, management and leadership, and you use the carrot and the stick. And what ends up happening is so much of the time these leaders are using the stick to get performance. And I hate that. I love the word and I hate the word, because they're trying to drive performance is what they try to say. And so a lot of times they're just beating people with a stick to try to get them to do what needs to happen. Now, when you beat somebody with a stick, do they feel happy? No, right? So why do you think, right, stress in the workplace and everything is going up?
Mm-hmm.
You said last year, $50 billion increase, right? Why? Because again, if you look at the general happiness level of employees at work and the stress level in the population in general, it jumped up significantly this last year, which is again going to translate into this with organizations. But, for some reason, like you said, a lot of these executives are kind of shaking their head thinking, well, I don't understand, how giving an attaboy at work is going to help somebody or how that's going to make a difference in my business. But it's one of the biggest, financial drain sucks that there is in corporate America. and doing just a little bit of stuff can have a dramatic difference in the output of the organization, financially as well as the well-being of the employees.
And something that I've started dealing with lately, and it piggybacks right where you're going, is that American companies spend just under $100 billion a year. Think about that number, $100 billion a year in recognition, traditional recognition, trips and bonuses and gift cards and things like that. Okay, so they're spending $100 billion a year in recognition, and we still have 80% of the workforce unengaged and unhappy. So it's like, okay, what's not working here?
Yeah.
Well, the premise of my whole perspective in the book is that stuff is not recognition. 24-hour food, foosball tables, ping pong tables, nap rooms, that's cool stuff. But I swear many, maybe most, corporate leadership, they believe that's culture and has nothing to do with culture. It might be indicative of a good culture, a powerful culture, a strong culture, a caring culture. But at the end of the day, human beings are very primal creatures. And there's things that we respond to. We respond a certain way when we're shown respect, empathy, consideration, trust. We tend to give a level of ourselves when we're shown that. And I call it above and beyond, and I won't get fired today. So every employee in every company, every single day shows up at their workplace and they have a choice that day. How much effort am I going to put in? Am I going to go above and beyond, or am I going to do just enough to slide by under the radar, not get fired? And what's the difference between these two? Well, intuitively, you know the answer. It's massive. Statistically, 30 to 70%. So what I say to corporate leadership, if I'm speaking or if I'm consulting, I said, okay, what would happen to your business model if you had your 500 employees or 1,000 employees or 5,000 employees show up tomorrow and give you 30% more effort in everything they did every day? What would that do? And it just makes their eyes glaze over, because bumps like that are unheard of. Yet companies like Zappos, REI, Starbucks, Costco to a degree, Southwest Airlines. The irony is that on everybody's list, Fortune, Forbes, Inc., Fast Company, best cultures in American business, it's always the same 15 companies. It's always this. I mean, there's 15, maybe 20 companies that are recognized for great cultures out of the tens of thousands of companies that are in America. Again, it's not a surprise, but there's a few companies that get it and a few CEOs who really get it.
Yeah, so the challenge is trying to help everybody else get it too, right? Because, again, unless you work for one of those 15 or 20 companies, a lot of people are going to work and they're not working in a good culture. And for me, I see this as a carryover too, that I think a lot of the stresses and pressure that's put on people at work, because they don't work in these good cultures that actually treat them like a human being, ends up finding its way into the rest of society, right? So again, we'll just take as an example, right? Maybe it's a husband who goes to work at a job where he's not appreciated, barely making enough to get by, has the pressure and the stress from his boss and everybody else, starts drinking as a way to try to cope with it, starts beating his wife and kids as a result of it, right? That it's like it carries over and it permeates throughout society. And I think that's another thing that a lot of times people don't realize or appreciate. It's not just the financial return for the company. I mean, obviously happier employees, more engaged employees, you get a lot better performance in every way, but it spreads out into society in general. Right.
And I seldom look at it that way, but that's a really profound point. Kathy?
Well, as I say, we spend a third of our lives at work, so that is absolutely going to affect what happens when we get home. And unfortunately, because we can't typically yell at the boss or punch the boss or act out with other employees and staff, we do tend to take that home. We take it on the freeway, we yell at the dog, we snap at the wife, all of that carries over into the rest of our lives. just like if we have miserable home life, it's not just about leaving work at work, it's about leaving home at home to a certain extent. And when I worked with 911 dispatchers, I found that one of the biggest complaints when I was doing the one-on-one consulting was not so much that people were carrying work around with them, but they were bringing their home life into work, and they were complaining about the husband, they're complaining about the kids, so that's a carryover to everything. But here's my question for you, Dennis. So I've never worked in a giant company. I'm my own boss. Sometimes I can be a raging bitch to myself. I'm working on my culture.
Hey, if it works for you, though, come on.
I occasionally give myself time off to pee. That's pretty much all I give myself time for. So how do you define culture? Because I agree. I think there's a complete misconception as to what that actually is. And people say they want to change culture and they get a foosball table and it's like, woo. So what is culture? How do you define that? And how do you start to identify how to change that?
There are many definitions, and I just frankly decided to write my own because it encompassed the scope of what I advocate and believe. I'm not saying other definitions of culture are wrong, but I believe this to be true. And I started a while ago. It's easier to start out with what culture is not. And as we talked about, culture is not sales plans, marketing plans, strategies, products, services, stuff, food, foosball, ping-pong, nap rooms. Okay, that's all stuff. Some of it's cool, some of it's not. Culture is what we feel, primally, right to our core. It's how we feel about our workplace, our peers, our place in the world. It's our core belief system. We go to bed with it at night. We get up with it in the morning. It never leaves us. And as you pointed out, we're in that workplace and we spend more time with those people than our families. Mm-hmm. That's just the way life is. So it's this sense of self. It's our ethics. It's how we see ourselves in the world. And I don't believe for a moment that I'm overstating that or making it too touchy-feely. I absolutely believe that's true. And that most companies don't look at their people within that context. And if they did, they would get more out of them, because a culture should be respectful, trusting, appreciative, joyful, and empathetic. Empathy is such a powerful word. Yeah. And it's a word that hardly is ever utilized in corporate America. Yeah. I mean, it's an eye roll moment. Say to a CEO, how's your empathy? And most of them would go, no, we didn't cover empathy in grad school.
Yeah, my MBA doesn't have empathy in it.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
There's no class on that.
It's almost looked at, the irony is it's almost looked at as a weakness.
Join us for the second part of the episode where we find out how to use compassion and empathy as a strength, not a weakness.